in our Constitution and looking at page number 9 in our Statement of Faith and letter N under creation. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, we'll probably go pretty quickly. I am going to touch on the other doctrines that are listed here, the arguments that are listed here, and refute them and tell you we don't even believe anything near those things. So let me read it. It says, we believe that God created the universe in 6 literal 24-hour periods. We reject evolution, the gap theory, the day-age theory, and theistic evolution as unscriptural theories of origin. So Genesis chapters 1 and 2, of course, speak of creation. Let's take a look at Genesis 1. And verse number verse number 5. So, of course, in the first several verses, it says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void. God said, let there be light. There was light. He made day and night. And in verse number 5 says, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, you've heard me say this before, literally translated from Hebrew, it literally translated says day 1. All right? So day 1 is different from first day. When I say from day 1, we like to have fellowship in our church. What does that mean?
From the first day it was created.
From the very first day that our church was started. So on the very day that it started. Now, were there other firsts? Yeah. Were there other first days in our church? So every Sunday is the first day of the week. Mm-hmm. So there's a subtle difference there. And so this is day 1. So that puts to rest this idea of the gap theory. Let me briefly explain that. Look at verse number 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. It was totally trashed. It was messed up. It was so bad because of verse number 2. It says it was void and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the earth, of the deep. And so some people want to say that means that God messed up the first creation and he went back and had to recreate everything. So there's a gap between verse number 1 and verse number 2. So verse number 1 is the first creation. In the beginning he created the heaven and the earth. Verse number 2 is the start of the second creation, letting us know that the earth was without form and void. Well, if you read this in plain English, he makes a blanket statement and then he tells us how he did the blanket statement. Then you go into the original language and you see that verse number 2 modifies verse number 1. And so there is no such thing as the gap theory. Does God make mistakes? No. Let's go down that road for just a second. Let's say God did make a mistake. Let's say he totally messed up the first creation, had to trash it, and then start over. All right, what does that do for everything else in the Scriptures?
Question mark, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that would.
Well, what if he messed up salvation?
Yeah.
What if, salvation is messed up and we don't know how to get to heaven? So if we throw doubt on something, on one thing, then what does that do? It throws doubt on everything. And so, and does God make mistakes? Nope. And so, gap theory, you can just mark that off. We don't believe that. Then the day-age theory. So in, where is it? Is it in Peter? Where it says, the scriptures say, a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. Okay? So basically that in context, that verse means that where God is, there is no time. But somebody has taken that verse out of context and placed it here into Genesis chapter 1 because it mentions days. And so they say that it was not 6 literal 24-hour days, it was 6 ages. 6 1,000-year periods. That is what the day-age theory is. Well, all right, let's say that that's true. Go with me to Exodus chapter 20, which, by the way, is in our text right here. Exodus chapter number 20. Anybody know what Exodus 20 contains? Exodus 20 contains the 10 Commandments. So as the Lord is giving the 10 Commandments, verse number 2, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Verse 3, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Verse number 4, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Verse 5, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them. Verse number 7, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Verse number 8, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Look at this. Verse number 9, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughters, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. So let's say that it took the Lord 6,000 years to create the heavens and the earth, right? That's the day-age theory. According to Exodus chapter number 20 and verse number 10, verse number 11, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and and rested the seventh. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And we're supposed to work for 6,000 years and then rest for 1,000, right? So if we apply the same thing that we're doing in Exodus or in Genesis chapter 1, that each day was 1,000 years, then in Exodus chapter 20, where the Lord speaks of He created everything in 6 days, and we make that 6,000 years, you have to work straight for 6,000 years before you get to rest. All right, anybody here tired?
Yes.
Anybody here even close to 6,000 years
No.
old? Anya, who's the oldest man in the Bible? Do you know that question? The name of the man who's the oldest man in the Bible. Do you know that answer? Methuselah. How many years did Methuselah live?
106?
Huh?
106?
Nope.
969.
969 years. He still hasn't made it through the first day. He still hasn't made it through he's still got work to do. So do you see how ridiculous this day-age theory is?
Yeah.
All right, and then the next one, theistic evolution. This is so that the Bible can line up with the theory of evolution. With the theory of evolution, how did everything begin? The Big Bang, right? So 2 molecules are flying through space. By the way, where did the 2 molecules come from? We won't talk about that. Where did space come from? We won't talk about that either. But they're flying through there, and then they hit each other and explode and then make what we have now. All right? So that's the Big Bang. That's evolution. Theistic evolution is, yes, there was a big bang. God created it, bang, it happened, and then he took his hands off of it and let it go. So that it took millions and millions or billions and billions of years, although God's the one that started it. But what does that do to Exodus chapter number 20? Right? It plainly says God created the heavens and the earth. That's Genesis. It clearly says in Exodus 20 that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 literal days. And we're supposed to rest. And so what? We now have to work for billions and billions of years now until we get to rest? What's the problem with theistic evolution? Could God have set it off with a big bang and took his hands off? He could have. But it says in Genesis chapter 1 that he didn't. He created everything in 6 days, told us what day he created everything. So theistic evolution is out. That's man trying to take away the supernatural of God creating the heavens and the earth. And that's Christian man trying to line up with scientific man. Because, science. We have to separate the Bible and science. Is that true? Does the Scriptures ever speak of science? Oh, all the time. Everywhere it speaks of it. I'm going to forget where now. I think it's Ezekiel. It talks about the circuit of the winds. It's amazing how it starts in the north and goes down to the south and returns back up to the north. And if you look at a weather map, what is our weather pattern?
That way.
Right? Doesn't it start up in the north and then it swoops down and hits Arizona and then swoops back up and hits the rest of the United States, and it does that way around the world? Well, the Scriptures spoke about that before. How about flat earth? Any flat earthers here? It's funny how the earth is always flat towards the moon and the space station when those guys are up in the space station. And the earth is always flat with it because they never talk about the backside of the disk. But the Scriptures speak of he hung the sphere of the earth in nothingness. And so, yes, the Scriptures speak of science. By the way, male and female created he them. It also speaks about growing old and getting gray hair. All of that is part of science. And so when the Scriptures speak of that, the Scriptures are right and that we catch up. But what theistic evolution is doing is God said it and they want to make it so that God does it the way man wants it to be done. And so we reject all of those theories. What we do accept and believe is what the Scriptures say. God created the heaven and the earth in 6 literal days and rested on the 7th. By the way, when he was done, do you think he really needed to rest?
No.
I mean, if you're omnipotent, if you're all-powerful, do you think he really needed to rest? Or do you think the Scriptures say that for our benefit so that we, as human beings that need rest, would rest? All right, let's look at civil government, letter O. We believe that God has ordained and created all authority, consisting in 3 basic institutions: the home, the church, and the state. Every person is subject to these authorities, but all, including the authorities themselves, are answerable to God and governed by His Word. God has given responsibilities with the understanding that no institution has the right to infringe upon the other. The home, the church, and the state are equal and sovereign in their respect to biblically assigned spheres of responsibility under God. All right, any questions about the statement? All right, let's take a look at some of the verses. Go with me to Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13, and we'll read verses 1 through 11. It says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror unto good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon them that doeth evil. Wherefore you must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor." And so the higher powers, we are to be subject to them, and we saw the three in our statement that are the higher powers. But all of them are subject to God. Okay? The home should be subject to God. The church should be subject to God. And by the way, the government should be subject to God. Has the government ever been subject to God? Brief moments in time. But a lot of times we as human beings want to take the reins and the responsibility, and we think that we're smarter than God, and so we're going to govern things the way we think they ought to be governed. But that's not so. And so we need to follow the higher powers, all right? And then according to our statement of faith, that means families. The father is the head of the house. Church, Jesus is the head of the church, but he placed an under shepherd. And government, well, we elect our officials. And so you get what you vote for. All right, Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter number 5. And verses 20 through 24. "Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything." And just so we don't leave them out, drop down to chapter number 6 and verse number 1. "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." All right, so who's subject to who in the home? Everybody's subject to the husband. Amen. Right? Everybody is subject to the husband, but who's the husband subject to? Lord. Yeah. And if he's subject to God, how's he going to treat his family? Very well. Very well. And so, people bristle at that submit. By the way, in verse number 21, it says, "Everybody submit yourselves one to another." And then everybody bristles at wives submit. I think there's only twice that it says wives submit in this, but there's 5 or 6 times that it says to the husbands, love your wife. Who has the bigger issue here, the wife submitting or the husband loving? That's right. Because who does the husband love more than anybody else? Himself. That's why he's commanded to love his wife 5 or 6 times in this chapter. All right, Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter number 13. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17. Hebrews 13, 17. Obey them that have the rule over you and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. Who does that sound like you need to submit yourself to? Well, those that have the rule over you. All right, so in the home, who is that?
The husband.
The husband. In the church, who is that? Pastor. In the government, who is that?
Lawmakers.
President.
President.
Right? Obey them. And I always like to bring up this last point, and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. If you're disobedient to the authorities, who does that hurt?
You. Throw you in jail.
So, probably ought to be obedient to the authorities placed above you. And then 1 Peter, and we'll be done. 1 Peter chapter number 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. And verses 13 and 14. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 13. It says, submit yourself to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. And so who does it sound like there that we need to be submitted to? The king and governors. All right, do we have a king in America?
The president.
Yeah. So no kings, right? No king. But it's amazing how it's okay to have kings in Venezuela. Let me back that up. Let me back that up for a second. I didn't say that. But we don't have a king in our country. We do have president and governors. So who are we to submit ourselves to? All right, so we've seen all three of these institutions that the Lord has ordained: the home, the church, and the government. And we need to submit ourselves to them so that it may be well for us. All right, I'm all done. Any questions or comments about what we just looked at? Did you turn it off?